So I'm not sure if you're already familiar with taking exams with BookWidgets, but in this case, we do have a safe exam browser integration that teachers are using within their Google Classroom environment and within their Microsoft Team environment or any other learning management system environment. The Safe Exam Browser integration that we have at this point is useful and you can still use it, but the issue that we got is that a lot of teachers are working with their students on Chromebooks, and Safe Exam Browser is an application that your students need to install on their Chromebook to be able to take the secure BookWidgets exams or tests. And that's, of course, an issue for Chromebooks because that is not allowed to install something on it. So we made exam links, and exam links are a way for you guys to share an exam within any monitoring system possible. So not just Safe Exam Browser, but any other monitoring system tools like class tools from Google, kiosk mode from Google, but also Classroom Cloud, Blocksy, or any other platform that you're using. You can just share an exam link created with BookWidgets to secure the exams for your students. So that's what you're going to learn today. And I'm going to show you how this works from BookWidgets point of view, because you do need to create some kind of exam link that you're going to paste into your software monitoring system, your supervision tool that you're also using if you're using one. If you're not using one yet, you'll still have to check if there are some good options for you to use, because just the standalone BookWidgets exam links are not going to work in this case. They are going to work, but they're not safe. So the safest way is to use the BookWidgets exam links and share it within your own trusted learning monitoring software. So that's what I'm gonna do today. So I'm gonna demo the exam links and the codes. We also have exam codes, and I'll explain why that is. And I have some extra resources set for you too, where you can find step by step what I just explained today, and also where you can find a blog post with some more information, again, of what you're learning today too. So let me just move on to my screen within BookWidgets, where I set up a math exam. Creating exams within BookWidgets is always done with a quiz, a worksheet, or a split worksheet activity, because you all have the question types in there and you have the general settings where you can make sure that all the settings are set for an exam. Like, do they see the scoring? Disable the auto grading, that they immediately get scores already, and so on. Before I show the exam links, I'm gonna show what was already there within BookWidgets, and that's in the general options, the Safe Exam Browser. The Safe Exam Browser option is interesting for any classroom where your students are working with laptops or iPads, so Windows computers, Mac computers, and iPads. If you're using Chromebooks, you cannot use this, and that's why we also are showing you the exam link that we just released too. But if you're using Windows, Mac, and iPad, and you have an integration with a learning management system like Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams or any other learning management system, you can use this. What you're going to do is open in Safe Exam Browser, check this, and this means that when you're sharing this activity within your Google Classroom environment with your students are prompted to open this worksheet within the Safe Exam Browser application. That application needs to be installed on their computer. You can just go to Safe Exam Browser and then download it for their device. And then it is locked in a safe environment, and students will not be able to open other tabs. And that's what it makes it more secure. So that's one of the things that was already in place here. I'm not gonna check this because this is not the thing that I'm gonna show, because this was already possible, and we do have a lot of documentation if you're if you want to use this, we do have a lot of documentation already, and I'll guide you after this. You will receive an email with documentation on Safe Exam Browser that we already had. And obviously also the new documentation on exam links. So I'm sharing this exam with my students, and I want to share it as an exam. So this is a normal widget, but I want to share it as an exam. So I go here, click share, and go to exam link. So I'm going to create a secure exam link for my students that makes the exam a little bit more secure already, without sharing it in a monitoring system. Obviously, sharing it in a monitoring system also blocks your students from opening other tabs. But the first thing here is that my exam was already shared with my students as, for example, like a test or a worksheet activity, but they don't know that later on it's going to be an exam, or it's just somewhere online already. I shared this, I've put this online already, and then I took it off, so the link wasn't available anymore, but the students couldn't click on the link anymore, but the link is still out there. So that makes it a security issue because the link is still out there. And if someone saved that link, students can still enter your exam without um, without it being in a monitoring system within that secure environment. So this is one of the things you will need to do if you create an exam that has already been shared once. Click here, disable share by link, just to make it secure. Because when I create an exam link, I'm gonna create a safe way for students to log into an exam, and they will need a single sign-on account to verify themselves and to authenticate themselves as a real student in your classroom. So, moving on. When I create an exam link, I will have to add some more settings here. So for the account, I will have to choose the account my BookWidgets account is already linked to. This is a single sign-on account. You can always click the information buttons right here to get a little bit more information on what this is. This means that your BookWidgets account does need a link with a Google Classroom setup or just a Google single sign-on. Doesn't need to be a learning management system. Just needs to be a Google environment, the Google single sign-on. Same way for Microsoft. So you can also select a Microsoft account if it's connected to a Microsoft environment. And for the Belgium teachers, there is also a connection to a Smart School single sign-on account. And this doesn't mean that you have to share this in your learning management system. The links that we're going to create here are going to be shared into your supervising monitoring system to make sure that the link that we're creating here is entirely locked for students. They are prompted to do the exam and nothing else. So this is one thing that we need to set up. I am linked with my Google account. And this means that my students will also have to use their single sign-on from Google to log into the account so we can authenticate that student. I can also select a course if I have courses, if it's connected to my Google Classroom. In this case, it's not connected to any course to my Google Classroom. I just have a Google account connected, and that's okay. If you have a Google Classroom account connected with your Google account, then you will be able to select a course. The course is purely administration. So when your students submit a test and in the results in the review dashboard, you will be able to select the course from which they're coming, and then you will see the results. So it's just administration. It's not going to change anything on the results or the setup. Doesn't matter if you make a mistake here either. That's fine. Expiration. So we're going to create an exam link that we're sharing with our students in a monitoring software system. And that exam link will be there. So my students click on the exam and it will open until the expiration date, because then it will not work anymore. So this is also an easy setup for you, that you don't need to take off the exam on your monitoring system, because it's going to expire anyways, and your students will not be able to still click the link and still open the exam. So this is also one of the security measures that's very good, to make sure that you have an expiration date that's very close to the end of your exam. I wouldn't say the exact date or hour. Maybe a few hours later would be okay, to make sure that you still have a margin there, but it is an interesting way to make sure that nothing else happens, nothing wrong happens, that no wrong students can open the exam at a different time. The next setup that we have here are resume codes. Resume codes are very interesting in when your students exit the exam for any reason. It could be that their Wi-Fi gets disconnected and they have to log into their monitoring system again, click the exam again, and then they will have to be able to continue the exam. That would be one option. The other would be that they just shut down and have an excuse like, there's something happened, and they are then opening other tabs and are trying to go back into the exam after they find a solution online. In that case, they will have to add a resume code, ask a resume code on at supervisor or the teacher, you, because you have these codes, and you will have to give it to the student to be able to move on in their exam. I will show everything later on. The Save Exam Browser option is still possible, that it will prompt Save Exam Browser immediately to open. We didn't delete it in the general options yet, because this is a known way for teachers to already do exams, and a lot of teachers know that they have to go to the general options to enable the Save Exam Browser. But it might be that in time we will be moving this setting just to the exam link setting, where you can enable it here as well. So I have my settings set. I'm going to create the exam link. I'm getting a lot of information here, starting with the information I've already set up, but then the next one is the exam code. There's a difference between exam codes and exam links in BookWidgets. So the exam code is interesting for when you're doing a high-stake exam with a supervisor. So you're not the person that is delivering the exam to your students. No, there is one big room with maybe 3 to 4 different classes, different subject matters that they have an exam on. And you have one supervisor in your classroom that is not necessarily the teacher of the students that are taking the exams. In that case, it would be very good to set up the BookWidgets exam link, the bookwidgets.com/exam. This is a link that you have to install in your monitoring system. If you don't install it in your monitoring system, you will see it also works like this, just in a tab, but your students have different ways to also enter the exam, not enter the exam, but also find other information, because they can still open other tabs. So this is the standard link that you would put in your in the monitoring system for every single student in your school. So the IT admin could set this up for all your students. So this is just it, and every single teacher will be giving their students a different exam code. This means that this exam code will be delivered to the supervisor of that classroom for the students, for Mrs. Lucy, and those students will have to write this code within their monitoring system. So their monitoring system, they're navigating to that system, they're clicking the exam, and this is the start screen that they will get. Then they get an exam code from their supervisor. that got the code from you as a teacher, and your students can start the exam in a locked environment. Obviously, we decided that your students need to log in using a single sign-on, so I'm gonna use a single sign-on right now for my students. Only then my students will be authenticated and be able to enter the exam. It is, again, you can see that this also works without that monitoring system, but what's the use of using exams and safe exam links if your students can just go anywhere and just copy paste information in the exam? So the exam link makes sure that no one else can enter your exams but the students. So that's also a safety measurement. But putting these links into or codes into a monitoring system, like again, a classroom cloud, a class tools from Google, a kiosk mode from Google, take a test from Windows, Blocksy from the United States. These tools will make sure that their students are really locked into the BookWidgets exam. So this is one way of going at it, of just making sure that you enable the bookwidgets.com/exam link. Set this up in your monitoring system and make sure to provide the exam codes for your students to make sure that they can enter the correct exam. That's one way. That's an exam code. You can also work with an exam link, and then you're sharing this exam link and pasting it into your monitoring system again as an admin or as a teacher when you have access to it. And then students will be immediately prompted to open the exam. So instead of making sure that they have to enter a code first, they will just click the exam and the exam will open it's automatically that correct exam. This setup is more interesting when you are the teacher with the strings in your hands, when you want to share the exam with the students in front of you. There's just one teacher and these are your students. You're just already setting up the correct link. They just have to click it or it will be prompted to them within the monitoring system. So that is the other way. When I move on, we have the resume codes. Resume codes are very interesting and again, something you should keep close. This information doesn't go away until your link expires, so you can always go take a look at your resume codes, but it's also needed for your supervisor. Again, if you're doing these high stakes exams, you have to give the resume codes to your supervisor because if you're not present at that time that your students are taking the exams and your students need the resume codes, then it's an issue if your supervisor doesn't have them. I want to show you what that looks like. So when your students are in the safe, secure monitoring system, they opened the exam, they did a single sign-on with Google in this case. Then when they refresh, or when the Wi-Fi goes out or there's something else happening with their computer and they have to shut it down, restart again. When they reload, that's also one of the issues. So the exam has to load again. That they get the signal that they need to add a resume code. So they cannot resume until they have a code. And this is like just a way for us to know that a student there was something wrong. The student could have also cheated maybe, but also any other issues were required. The student needs to pull up their hand and then ask for a resume code of the supervisor, or if you are the teacher in that classroom, you can also give that resume code. So the first one is footage. So as a supervisor or as a teacher, you're providing the continuing code, resume code, and then your students can continue the exam. I'm just gonna move over. I'm just clicking, so it's not probably not the right answers. For example, if I, as a student, don't know this answer, I can start this question, maybe for later on to go back, or when my teacher comes in the environment, in the classroom, to check on the students that are taking her exam or his exam. I can also ask about this question for my teacher. I have no clue what the right answers are, so I'm just doing some stuff here. Okay, I'm just leaving it like that. And then I'm gonna submit, still in Dutch here, so I can then submit, but I'm gonna wait a little bit with that. So that is one of the things. We're gonna continue with the feedback link. So we have the exam codes, we have an exam link. We're just gonna use either one of them. Then we have the resume codes that we need to keep close or give to the supervisor. There's also a feedback link. The feedback link you can also share in your software monitoring system. When you return the feedback to your students in that software monitoring system, they can click that link and they can view their feedback within that secure environment. So they won't be able to copy paste, to take screenshots of your feedback and BookWidgets, the questions in your exam, but they will be able to view the feedback in that secure environment. And later on, again, if the link gets retired, the feedback will also not be available anymore. Then we have URLs to allow, and this is sometimes needed in these software monitoring systems. In a lot of cases, you just need to share the BookWidgets exam link in that system, but in other systems, they restrict every single link to start with, and then you need to allow this and the single sign-on as well. We will always automatically give these links in case you need them in your in your software monitoring system. I'm going to show you a little bit how this looks like in Classroom Cloud, one of the many monitoring tools. So don't pinpoint on how this looks like, but every monitoring tool will at a point ask for you to put in a link that you want your students to go to secure, to lock in their environment. So that will be the same for almost every system. So I have my screen here and it's set on Classroom Cloud. This is a monitoring system where you can push links, secure links to your students where they are logged into just that link that you're sharing there. What you're doing is going to web monitoring and you will be able to see all your students that are online at that time. This tool has a lot of other options too, but what we're looking for is going to the settings manage, where we're gonna add approved links. So in the web monitoring tool, we want to monitor the allowed links, the approved links that that we're giving to our students in that closed environment. So we're going to click here on that plus because we're adding the links that we need right here. And you can just share the exam link, but always if you are not sure if you always also have to include the other links, you can also just add the URLs to allow, because one of them will always be the exam link and the other is most of the time a single sign-on page that is allowed for your students to make sure that they can single sign on in that exam. So I'm just gonna copy that one, the exam link. This is the BookWidgets exam. And I'm gonna add another one. That's the other, that's right here. And that's the single sign-on. You don't have to add it here. You can just leave it blank too, but just add the link. That's an important one. So these two links are needed to add here. And the next step I'm gonna do is just approved only. So when I click this monitoring, the web tool monitoring, I'm just gonna push these links to my students at that point that are logged in. They have a Classroom Cloud extension. They just open the extension, leave it open. So they click the extension right here. They leave it open. And when I push it, click this button, all my students, the exam will open immediately. Another way to do it is, instead of adding these the real exam links is again bookwidgets.com/exam. Then the website will be prompted where they have to enter an exam code. So not the exam will automatically start up. Your students will still manually need to add the exam code that the supervisor has or the teacher has in this case. So I hope this is a little bit clear. I'm gonna move on to a live monitoring, because when you're doing that exam, you're also able to live monitor your students. Live widgets used to be only possible when you were connected with a learning management system. In this case, because your students are authenticated with a single sign-on, we can also live monitor our students. I'm gonna close here first. And before I move on to live monitoring, I just wanna note that in your exam link, when you're clicking share again, go to exam link, you will see here all the exam links that you've created. So for one exam, you can actually create multiple exam links and share one link with that classroom, maybe the other link with another classroom. If you're not sure that this code will be shared with students with their smartphones or stuff, then you can make it more secure by doing it differently. Then we have the expiration date. You can add a link. These listings will go away after expiration date. So then you will not be able to see this anymore. When you click it, we're at the same screen where you can find the exam code, exam link, and resume codes. And then what you also can see is here that this link requires a code to resume the exam. So when students are going to be outside the exam, they can only continue after adding that resume code that you or the supervisor gave them. Next up, we're going to go to follow, because we were in an exam. And I shared the exam in a monitoring system in Classroom Cloud, but also in this case, just in a browser tab. And I can monitor now my math exam. So I can just click here and I can see every single student listed in this mode. Also, again, this is a very good setup for when you are the teacher and you see all your students in front of you, but also when you're doing high stakes exam, when there's a supervisor monitoring your students. You can still check the live widgets dashboard when you're moving from one classroom to the other to see if your students have questions about the exam. Just open up the live widgets view, and you can immediately also see all the students that have starred particular questions. This could ring a bell for you, like, okay, this student does have a question about question 2. So I'm gonna go up to that student and see if they need more explanation. So that would be also a nice way to monitor your students live. You can also see exactly what they're answering already. So I did make some good choices here, but you can see it live and you can go back 30 days eventually. There are also some other actions that you can take. And one thing that you can see here as well is that that one student was already out the exam and they required a resume code to continue. So when students have this door icon after their name, it needs to ring a bell for you to really check their work if they did not cheat, because they at some point they exited the exam and they entered it back again. So these resume codes, only if you work with and enable these resume codes, you will be able to see this alert message. Moving on, there are some other actions you can take individually for your students in Live Widgets during the exam. And that is, like, for example, for this student, I could reset the timer. So there's no widget timer on this activity, but when the time runs out for this student and she does need like 10 more minutes and she's allowed to have 10 more minutes, you can just reset the timer for this particular student without changing the exam, updating the exam, making sure your students need to reload and then enter a resume code, because that would be way too inefficient. There are some other actions you can take, and I will show you where you can find some more information about all the different actions you can take in Live Widgets. So that is one of the things during the math exam. This is a math exam. During the exam, what you can do with Live Widgets. When they submit the exam, let's submit the exam. So you can, by the way, also see that your students submitted it, and students that forgot to submit but did the exam, also again, an action that you can take right here is to submit the current student answers for them. So if you have students that are forgetting to submit, yeah, then you can just still submit them so you have something to grade and review. Going back to review, the next step is when they submitted the exam, I want to review the exam. Obviously, I'm not going to explain every single feedback comment that you can do here, but I'm going to show you that it is important that you can return the feedback to your students within that monitoring system. So first, I'm going to grade my math exam, and I will have all my students listed right here. Again, I have, when I'm not checking Live Widgets, I still have a view and I still get alerted about that student that opened the exam 2 times. So they went into the exam, went out again, and went in again. So that's an interesting fact to know for this student. When I graded everything, I'm gonna check all my students, select all work. And when I did that, I'm gonna click return work. What I can do here is schedule the return. When do I want to return this to my students? When there is like one big moment, my students can come into the room and watch their results together with me in a secure environment. Then you can schedule it to make sure it's only possible for them to open the feedback then, that day, that hour of the day. You can also reclaim the feedback. So the feedback that you gave after that hour, you can make sure that it's not there anymore on the monitoring system. So that's also a very interesting thing, to pull back the feedback so they don't have the questions. They cannot go to that monitoring system, still open the feedback and still have these questions to take pictures of and to send out to other friends, to other students maybe. So that's an interesting one too. Then I'm gonna click return work. I'm not gonna be able to because I can return, but it's gonna just go to me, my Google account. But for your students, it is interesting now to go to Classroom Cloud, cancel, click here to plus and add the feedback URL here. So then when your students go to Classroom Cloud and when you launch this URL for your students, they will all see their separate feedback. So that's a very interesting one. Again, I'm going to the math widget. Again, real quick. Because we had that feedback link, this is it. This one I need to paste again in my monitoring system, save, and when it's the time I can launch this link, I can just click that link with the answers in it, launch it for my students. I'm not able because my students are not online now. Launch it for my students, and every single student will have their separate feedback with the feedback messages, with the grades and the correct answers too. So that's a very interesting setup there too. And I think at this point, I've gone over everything that is exam links. Let's check my extra resources. So we do have a blog post on it. So with everything I just explained, we have written it all out. And more interesting, if you're not sure what kind of school setup you have now and what would be the best solution for you to use. Do you still use the sub configuration in the widget if we're already using that? Do you work with exam links or do you work with exam codes? And there's an explanation why it works best. For example, you're a school working on Chromebooks using a learning management system. The fact that you're working on Chromebooks makes sure that you cannot use Safe Exam Browser. So you'll need to use exam links and you'll need to use exam codes or codes. And there's a nice explanation of why you can work with the one or the other. It will guide you a little bit better in making your decisions here. Moving on, there's a step-by-step tutorial. So just go everything I just explained today. You can click through one by one, and it will explain you very shortly what you can do here. Beneath, there's a longer explanation. So this will be a very good one to share with your colleagues. If you're doing this as a school, they need to be informed. Obviously, this webinar will come online too. So this would be a nice, handy video tutorial for them to check out as well.